All right, first thing we did is we came up with our observations. We decided the things we're going to test are amplitude, mass, and length. And we're going to measure the period and the time. So how these things change because of these things. So then the purpose of the lab, we said every time the purpose statement starts out this way, the purpose of the lab is 2. Then we did how our independent affects the dependent. So I wrote determine what, if any, affect mass, amplitude, and length. So there's my independent variables. Have on pendulums period, which is my dependent variable. So I'm checking and make sure, did I put all 3 independent variables in here? Yes, I did. Did I put my dependent variable in here? Yes, I did. So one sentence exactly like this every time. Purpose of the lab is 2. Talk about your independence. Talk about your dependent. That's all you need. Okay, so let's talk about the hypothesis. So the hypothesis is going to be what you think is going to happen. So you're going to write a hypothesis for each one of these things. You're going to write a hypothesis for the mass. You're going to write a hypothesis for the amplitude. And you're going to write a hypothesis for the length. And all you have to do for the hypothesis is tell me what you think is going to happen. And here is what is going to happen. Either it's going to be directly proportional, which means if you increase the mass, you increase the period. So larger mass means a larger period. It takes longer. Okay? That's directly proportional. Or it could be inversely proportional. That means they're opposites. So if you increase the mass, you would decrease the period. So making it heavier makes it take less time, shorter period. Okay? Or it could have no effect. So if you increase the mass, it does not change what happens to the period. The period stays the same the whole time. So for the hypothesis, you're going to tell me what you think is going to happen. Now, you don't have to be right. You're just taking your best guess. So I'm going to do an example of mass. You don't have to have the same conclusion as me. So if you don't think this is what's going to happen, then don't write what you think is going to happen. But I'm going to give you an example, and then I'm going to give you time to do amplitude and length. So for mass, I'm going to say something like, I think mass has no effect on period. Now, you may not think that's true. You may think it's directly proportional. You may think heavier mass means larger period. So you would write, I think mass and period are directly proportional. Or you might write, I think they're inversely proportional. But I want you to do that for each of these. Do this for mass. Do this for amplitude, do this for length. So write down what you think it is. So now we're going to do the procedure. So the first thing you need to do on the procedure is you need to list the materials you're using. The materials you're using are a pole, a hanger, string, and masses or weights or whatever you want to call them. Okay? That's what you're using. And a meter stick. You're using a meter stick too. So you just write those things down. Easy peasy. Okay, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to make a list of the experiments you're going to perform. This does not need to be challenging. You're just going to write, so I'm going to write for mass. So what's the experiment I'm going to do for mass? The experiment I'm going to do is I'm going to change the weights that hang from the string, and I'm going to measure the period. Okay, that's it. So I'm going to change the weights on the string and measure the period. Now, we're not really going to measure period, but we'll get to that in a second. Period is the thing we're worried about, though, right? The effect on period, how it affects period. We're going to measure the period. So that's what I would do for now. Go ahead and do that for the other two as well. Amplitude. For amplitude, you're going to change how far you pull it back. And then for length, you're going to change how long the string is. So just write real quick, what's the experiment you're going to do? So again, my example is, for the mass, we're going to change the weights on the string, and we're going to measure the period. Easy peasy. All right, now that you've got this listed, you got your so you got your materials listed, you got what experiments you're doing. You're going to go to the back page. We're going to do the second bullet point first, because this is going to be the same for all of them. I want to know how many values are you going to use for your independent variable. So how many different masses are you going to do? How many different amplitudes? How many different lengths? That's going to be for all of these. You're going to do 5 independent variables. Okay? And you're going to do 3 trials each. So you're going to do 5 different masses 3 times for each mass. 5 different lengths 3 times for each length. 5 different amplitudes 3 times for each amplitude. So that's what you're going to do first. Okay. Now, how are you going to measure these? So for each of these, we need to have a different thing. So the first thing we've been talking about, we did mass and length, right? So the first thing we're going to talk about is how are we going to measure the masses? All we're going to do is we're going to change the value of the mass. So I have a bunch of different masses in the back. You're just going to switch them out. These are very easy to switch out. These are slip knots. So all you have to do is get the rope loose, and you can stretch it out. And you can take your weight off. You put your new weight on. You tighten it, and then it's on. So you can change the masses really easily. So all you have to do, how you're going to specifically measure the mass, you're going to change the value of the mass. That's it. You're going to change the value. Okay. The next thing we talked about was amplitude. For amplitude, you're going to pull the pendulum back by different amounts. So for amplitude, you're going to change how far you pull it back. You're going to change how far you pull it back. That's it. Okay? So you're going to change it to different values. Simple, easy peasy. Okay, third thing was length. Okay, for that one, you're going to change how long the string is. The easiest way to do that is to wrap the string around the hanger different amounts of times. So if I wrap it around once, twice, now I have a different length. And I would measure that with my meter stick. Okay? Once, twice, now I've got a different length, and I'd measure that with a meter stick. Okay? So easy peasy on that one. Again, you want your weight to be kind of right above the table. So when you change the length, it would be a good idea to then lower it down so it gets closer to the top of the table again. Remember, it's the length of the string, so it doesn't matter where the weight is. It matters how long the string is. So if you lower it, that doesn't affect anything. You have to wrap it around to change the length. Okay? So you're going to change how long the string is. And then the last thing we need to do is period. Now, period is the time it takes to go back and forth once. Depending on what your measurements are, that could be really fast. Faster than what you can measure easily. So what we're going to do is, instead of measuring how long it takes to go back and forth once, we're going to measure how long it takes to go back and forth 10 times. So what we're going to do is we're going to measure the time of 10 oscillations. So we're going to measure the time it takes to go back and forth 10 times. So again, for the mass, we're just going to change the values that we hang from the end. For the amplitude, we're going to pull it back different distances. For the length, we're going to change how long the string is. And for the period, we're going to measure the time to go back and forth 10 times. Okay, does anyone have any questions on the procedure parts? So any questions on these 4 things? List of materials, the experiments we're going to do, how we're going to measure each of these things, or or how many times we're doing them. Any questions on anything? Let's make these data tables and then let's do some measurements. All right. You are going to need to make 3 data tables. You may not be able to fit them all on this page. If you can't fit them on this page, the back page is blank. So you can do the rest of them on the back. I'm going to show you how to do one of them, and then you will make the other 3. The one we're going to do together is mass. So the first thing it says, each table needs a title explaining what variable you're changing. So I'm going to write mass. Yeah. There we go. Off to a rip-roaring start here. Okay. Once you've done mass, the next thing you need to do is you need to write what the variables are that you're holding constant and their values. Okay. So I'm holding constant length, and amplitude. Those things are not going to change for me. So when I'm changing the mass, I'm not changing the length, and I'm not changing the amplitude. So we need to write down what these numbers are. So right now, I want everyone to write down the amplitude to be 3 centimeters. So that means everyone, no matter what you're doing, if you're not changing the amplitude, I want you to pull it back 3 centimeters. That's what everyone should write down here, 3 centimeters. Everyone's going to pull it back 3 centimeters on the mass chart. You're also going to do 3 centimeters on the length chart. On the amplitude chart, it's going to change. But on the mass and the length chart, it'll be 3 centimeters. All right, length. I want you to measure your string right now. Go ahead and measure your string. Measure what the length is. You're going to write that down here for length. So measure what your string's length is. Do it right now. It's from the weight to where the string wraps around the hanger. So mine is 64.5. Yours will be different, so write whatever yours is. Don't write mine. So mine is 64.5. Okay? So you should have a length. You should have an amplitude. Okay. Once you've got those listed, you're going to make a chart. So you're going to make a box down here. What do you need? Let's get the chart set up. Let me set up this one with you, and then I'll write you a pass down there. But I want to get this set up so you know what to do, and then you can do the rest of them when you get back. All right, so we're going to make a chart now. Okay, you should have a column for 5 different values for your independent variable. So you should have 5 rows, 1 for each independent variable, and you should have a column where you change the independent variables. So here's my first column, and it's going to have 5 rows, 1 for each of my changes in mass. And underneath that column, I'm going to write mass because that's what I'm doing in that column. I'm changing the mass. Now, you need to write down what masses you're going to use. Now, the first mass you're going to use is whatever is on your thing right now. Whatever is on your string, that's your first mass. So most of you, it's 500, but a few of you may not be 500. Mine is, so I'm going to write 500 grams. If yours is not 500 grams, write whatever yours is. For the other 4, you're going to grab different weights from the back. Now, you don't know what you're using yet because you haven't started that yet. So leave the other 4 blank for now. But you'll get different weights, and that's what you'll write down. So maybe you get a 100, so you write the 100 down. Maybe you grab a 200, so you write 200 down. Maybe you add a 200 to your 500. You write 700 down. Whatever you use. Okay? Doesn't matter what they are. They just need to be different. And they need to be significantly different. Don't add a 10 to 500 and do 500 and 510. That's not going to be noticeable. So make them different enough. Okay, then you need a column for each trial. We said we're doing 3 trials, so we need 3 more columns. Here's column 1 for trial 1, trial 2, trial 3. So under this one, I'm going to write T1 for trial 1. T2 for trial 2, T3 for trial 3. You will need an additional column for the average of your trials. And you'll need an additional column for the period. And there you go. There's your data chart. We got what it is. We've got what we're keeping constant. We've got what we're changing. We've got a column for each trial. We've got a column for the average. We've got a column for the period. That's what we have for our data tables. You're going to need to make 2 more of those. You need to make one for length, and you need to make one for amplitude. For the length one, you're going to have mass constant and amplitude constant. For the amplitude one, you're going to have length constant and mass constant. For the length one, you're going to put your different lengths in this first column, but the rest of the columns will still the same. For the amplitude, you'll put your amplitudes in this first column, and the rest of the columns will stay the same. So what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and I want you to make your other 2 data tables. I will come and look at them to make sure you're doing okay, but I want you to make your other 2 data tables so that you have everything set and ready to go. Angela, once you got that one made, I'll write you. You said you need to go to the library. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Cool. All right, so get those other ones set up.